Welcome, everyone. I know you're just getting having a moment to shift over from the previous session to the keynote. So I'll give it just a minute or two here as people are clicking on join and coming with us. So Amanda, we'll just give it maybe 1 or 2 minutes and then I'll introduce you and we'll get started.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Mhm. Welcome, everyone. We'll be starting in just a moment. Welcome, everyone. Just giving people a minute to jump over from the previous session. I'm glad to see you all were able to navigate the virtual conference platform. Glad to have you all here. Thanks for joining. If you didn't introduce yourself in the welcome session, you are welcome to do so now. Happy to see who's here, where you're coming from. I know there's a few from the West Coast, like Amanda, who are up very early to be with us. So thank you. We really appreciate that. Okay, and we can go ahead and get started. So welcome to our keynote session, Thinking Outside the Box of Mental Health and Identity. We have Amanda Lipp with us today. Amanda is a filmmaker, speaker, and entrepreneur working at the intersection of mental health care, storytelling, and technology. Amanda has produced over 100 short multimedia products about mental health and social impact. Drawing on her own lived experience, she's focused on elevating complex topics like psychosis, mass trauma, and recreational therapy. Since the age of 18, Amanda has given over 150 talks around the globe, sharing resources and her own personal story. Amanda currently serves on the Mental Health Advisory Panel at Google and is the Interdepartmental Serious Mental Illness Committee. Oh, I'm sorry, and on the Interdepartmental Serious Mental Illness Committee. She formerly served as the youngest board member for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI. She's also a graduate of UC Davis with a BS in Human Development. She wears many, many hats, if you can't tell already. She's also the co-founder of 2 social enterprise companies, the Giving Gallery and NeuroHealth, both focused on mental health and philanthropy. She's also a specialist for the Center for Applied Research Solutions, a nonprofit that supports state and federal mental health initiatives. Outside of work, as if she can possibly have any other time, Amanda's hobbies include rock climbing and mountain biking, and she holds a very impressive black belt in Kung Fu and Kenpo. A fun fact, she embraces an alternative and adventurous lifestyle. She DIY built her own van in 2022, and she lives in full-time as she travels around the country promoting advocacy and awareness. I've had the opportunity to work some with Amanda around early psychosis interventions. She's a lovely human being dedicated to improving services by highlighting the voices of those with lived experience. And I'm so thrilled she's here to share her story and experiences with all of you. So welcome, Amanda. Thank you. And we look forward to hearing from you.
Oh, thank you so much, Anne, for that introduction. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for taking this virtual commute over to my session. I really appreciate you all being here. So, good morning. And anyone who also does van life, please drop it in the chat. Would love to meet other van lifers out there. I'm not in my van right now, actually, as you can see, but As Anne mentioned, I'm typically full-time in my van. That was my COVID project, right? We all had a weird COVID project that we may have taken on, right? So drop your weird COVID project in the chat if you had one. Maybe you learned how to bake bread or sew or built something or got out of your comfort zone. And that's kind of the theme of today's talk too, is thinking outside the box of mental health, whatever that might mean to you, whatever hat you're bringing. So I really encourage you to think outside the box, right? And apply that however it might relate to you and what you're bringing to this room today. I also encourage you to take care of yourself, right? We're talking about mental health, and that can be activating sometimes, right? I'll be sharing a little bit of my own lived experience, my story of recovery, and some of the lessons that I've learned along the way that maybe will resonate with you or spark some ideas. And I'll also be sharing some short films that I've created to also spark some ideas and some inspiration around how we think outside the box of recovery, innovation, and also for ourselves, right? We have a lot of providers in the room, and how do we think about their mental health too? Educators, administrators, right? People on the front lines helping caregivers and our kiddos in this society, right? So, with that, my talk is called Think Outside the Box of Mental Health. And well, let's make it a crayon box. I'm going to explain the significance of why crayons in a little bit, so bear with me. First, I'd like to show you the behind the scenes of my creative process, and I'll explain what that means too in a little bit. I first start by considering the layers of color I might use. What layers are needed in my foundation to get a certain outcome? How do we get from start to finish? And how do the layers in between affect the look you want? Well, I have found that working backwards can help, starting with what you envision and what layers might get you there. It is a process of experimentation, so it's okay to not know what layers of color you might want. I typically work from light to dark, but it just depends what color you want to emerge when you get to the etching. Let's see how it works. I actually made that video over 10 years ago, but I still show it to this day because it is my creative process to this very day. And those layers on top of that framework is what I think about on really a daily basis. What are the layers that I'm going through? And I'll be going into that more throughout this talk. But how do we think outside the box of mental health, right? For ourselves, the people we love, and the systems we work in, the people we help, perhaps. Well, for me, my journey exploring these questions really started with a box of crayons. And then the crayons serving as this larger metaphor for life, for stories, for systems, and for our own wellness as well. So today I hope to communicate this crayon metaphor. If you have crayons, grab them, bring them over, have fun with it. I hope you never look at crayons the same way, but really it's the little things, right? And so this crayon metaphor is what I'm going to take you on in this journey of thinking outside the box, the crayon box of mental health. Now, for me to explain why crayons, I need to take you back to 2010, to the day that changed my life forever. This is me in a tree, and I'm 18-year-old freshman in college. And in this photo, I'm experiencing a full-blown mental health breakdown. I'm experiencing mania, psychosis, followed by the depths of depression, essentially accessing the upper and lower limits of my mind. The transition from high school to college was difficult for me. The stress, getting new friends, trying to navigate classes, trying to navigate on-campus mental health services, and also the stigma that I had around that, right? Getting on board with services early on. Well, little did I know that about a week after this picture was taken, I would be admitted to the psychiatric hospital and spend the next 3 months cycling between ICU, inpatient, and outpatient services in Sacramento, California, essentially learning from the inside out how the system works. Ironically, I had been studying psychology with the dream of helping other families and young people navigate trauma and systems of care. I didn't expect that I would become the patient first, that I'd be the one in crisis. That was definitely a curveball in the plan, right? We have this idea of how our life looks, and then life happens, right? Usually when we least expect it. I was so used to studying psychology through the lens of other people, right? Other people who experience issues, that I forgot to look in the mirror until I had to. In hindsight, I believe that was foreshadowing to my first major life lesson, and one that I really am still learning today. That for me to help others truly, I would first need to learn how to help myself. And to learn that there was nothing noble in sacrificing my own mental wellness to help someone else, but that my mental health mattered just as much, and that I could actually do better work if I fed my soul as much as I fed other people, or the desire to do so. I would later joke with my friends that the psychiatric hospital experience was like the internship of my life, right? It was the second half of my freshman year of college, so it was kind of like an internship, right? We can say that. Now, I don't put it on my resume necessarily, but I do speak about it, so it's out there. And, I look back with pride, right? I learned a lot. It really was like an internship in some sense, right? I learned a lot of values and principles, the power of leading with vulnerability, compassion, and that the little things can make all the difference in our healing and how we work on healing for ourselves and help others heal as well. And in case you're wondering how I got this photo, I honestly have no idea, but a friend of mine at the time must have given it to me. This was pre-social media, pre-iPhone. We had these things called digital pocket cameras. Drop in the chat if you still use a digital pocket camera. We have to know who you are. They're awesome. I still have one, I think, in my parents' garage somewhere. And it's always a nostalgic moment to bring it out. But needless to say, I'm very grateful that I have this photo because it reminds me of a time in my life where I was really, really having a hard time, right? That I used to be ashamed of, that I used to hide, and now I wear on my sleeve and share with you today. While I was in the hospital, it really wasn't until a very thoughtful psychiatric nurse practitioner, Nurse Mare, noticed I wasn't doing well and came over and handed me a box of crayons. And that's when everything changed for me. This seemingly small gesture by Nurse Mare, handing me a broken box of crayons, pulled me out of a darkness and loneliness that I was only able to express through my crayon drawings. You see, Nurse Mare didn't just hand me a box of crayons. She modeled for me what compassion and kindness look like. So then I thought, well, if Nurse Mare can show me compassion and kindness and creativity, well, maybe I can do that for myself, right? Maybe then I can get back on track to my dream of helping other people, as that was the goal in the first place. So I became pretty obsessed with drawing with crayons. It was a way to fixate my mind and regulate my nervous system as well. It became very meditative. I became interested in drawings that felt both symmetrical yet chaotic, darkness with color, despair with hope, right? It was like I was trying to reconcile two sides of my mind at the same time, the mentally ill side and the trying to get well side. And where is the line between the two? Can we have both at the same time? Can I be Amanda and can I also be mentally ill? Right? I was 18 years old. I was going through this identity transformation as well as trying to find out where the line was between mental illness and mental wellness and how they're really two sides of the same coin, in my opinion. Right? And then the intersection of identity as well, and the multiple identities and hats we wear and bring to the table every day to ourselves and in the cultures we live in. Right? What sides are doing well and what sides could use some love and community, right? Shifting our thinking to progress over perfection and those little steps we can do to protect those vulnerable sides and reach out for help if we need them. And I think this drawing was trying to communicate that. To connect their physical sensations to psychological events, then they slowly reconnect with themselves. Well, for me, this was crayons. What is it for you? Feel free to drop in the chat what your bridge might be between your physical self and your psychological self. Maybe there's some medium or outlet that you do that helps you integrate with your body and become one with it. This is by The Body Keeps Score, one of my favorite books that I try to read every other year because it's dense. So, and feel free to drop in the chat if you've read that book or what you think about it. I'm sure there's so many books on the topic, but I like this one. Think big, act small is what Nurse Mare taught me by handing me a box of crayons. The think big part is the compassion, the empathy, right? The act small part is the behavior or action, the paying it forward to others, right? And then in turn, this gesture, this action develops trust, vulnerability, and connection, right? The crayons was a symbol. It was an act of friendship, an act of, hey, I believe in you, right? I took that and I ran with it, right? Because I was needing hope at that moment when I was in the hospital, right? The little things we can do. It could be a sticky note that you put on your colleague's desk when you walk by in the morning with, hey, you got this, I believe in you. Or a message, a DM through Zoom saying, I really like your shirt today. Or hey, is that a cat behind you in your Zoom background? I didn't know you had a cat, right? Like just these little things we can do that the compound interest of those little things, just like the layers in my crayon drawing, can lead to things that we really didn't realize, right? Investing in those think bigs, act small. I want to share another example of a think big, act small by my mother. When I was in the hospital, I really wasn't doing well. I was having a really hard time and I was feeling really lonely, right? I missed my friends. I was supposed to be in college, right? I had a lot of shame and a lot of guilt around not being on track like I was supposed to be. So my mom decided to take it upon herself and mass email a bunch of trusted, close family, friends, coaches, people in my life who she knew I would want to be connected with, right? So she emailed these family friends and coaches and mentors and said, hey, my daughter's in the hospital and she's not doing so well. Would you be comfortable? Would you mind sharing a story of something that you overcame, maybe a hard time in your life where you were looking for support? And she received dozens and dozens of stories. They just flooded her inboxes, the mailbox, you name it, phone calls, video, everything. Like, hey, yeah, like I have something to share. Maybe Amanda would want to hear it. In fact, one of these letters in the binder is from an individual who unfortunately took his life that very same year. And this very well may have been one of the last letters that he wrote. And he wrote it to me, right? There's so much power in stories. My mom then delivered me this binder of stories to me while I was in the hospital, and it made me feel less alone. Of course, it was hard to read, right? It was difficult. These were really, really deep stories. And also, it gave me hope. And it was an honor to read people's vulnerability, right? And the ripple effect of vulnerability. I'm curious if you can think of a think big, act small. Maybe you are receiving this think big, act small, just like I received a box of crayons. Or maybe you're giving a think big, act small, right? Feel free to drop that in the chat if you have a think big, act small, or something you want to do, perhaps. You want to manifest that and put that energy out into this community today of people who get it, right? Who are in this field and very passionate about mental health, right? And what was the impact of this think big, act small on the receiving or giving end, right? I have a sticky note on my mirror at all my family members and friends' houses. I always kind of put it there of some kind of affirmation or think big, act small. So when they look in the mirror, they know someone loves them. So the crayons were a big deal for me, right? And it really became, again, this metaphor and this exercise. The crayons are the tools, the paper is your opportunity, and the layers are your story, right? What is beneath the surface of what's going on in your life? How do we dig deep? What's in your crayon box? What layers are you dealing with? The crayon box are like the coping mechanisms, right? The things we do to stay well, right? For example, I love to rock climb. I love to get out of my comfort zone. It's kind of scary, of course, always being safe, right? But it gets me out of my head, right? I can't overthink something if I'm on a mountain. I got to be focused on that mountain. And I've been learning how to build tiny homes recently. I'm actually not very good at it. I honestly have to re-nail and re-screw in drivers all the time. It's not a natural skill, but it's a skill that I'm really enjoying developing and I'm having fun doing it, becoming more handy and also building tiny homes for people who could really use them in displaced environments or who lost their home to natural disaster in California, right? So how do we do something we love and maybe also it's giving back to the community as well? So those are the two things that are in my crayon box, two of many different activities and trying to have that balance. Feel free to drop in the chat what's in your metaphorical crayon box. Or maybe you're a crayon artist yourself and that's your actual crayon is the crayon. So feel free to share if you're comfortable those different things that you do to really feed your soul, right? the things you do that help you feel well and alive. Really, the idea here is to invest in yourself, right? To invest in your self culture and how that then builds a work culture or a family culture or a friend culture, insert X culture. But really, that classic analogy of putting on your oxygen mask first, right? And this was that initial lesson that I learned when I was in the tree experiencing psychosis and mania, right? Was I wasn't helping myself. I was so invested in other people in that people pleasery kind of way that I literally lost sight of my own identity. And that was such a huge, humbling lesson of, wow, I really need to pay attention and go inward and reflect and not lose my sense of self, right? How do you invest in your self culture? How does this translate to how you show up for your family, your friends, and as a leader, perhaps in the workplace, or as someone who's passionate working on a project? As you saw in the opening video, I have this layering and etching process, right? And this is what I discovered in the hospital. Wow, oh, okay, wax can really layer upon itself, right? This is really interesting. How does this then translate to my own layers of my story? Trauma, LGBTQ, dropping out of college. How does that build up to something beautiful, something I can translate into an opportunity, into something that I can reframe as an experience to learn from or to build from? And then how does this translate into society, right? Integrating our experiences of self with society. What are the layers of society so many we're aware of? Self-stigma, embarrassment, shame, prejudice, clinical assumptions. How does that go upward to the parts that we see, right? How is that expressed in society? Through perhaps labels or how we express ourselves or discrimination or advocacy, community, the things that we see with our eyes and with our sensory processes, right? But all of that is fed by what's below the iceberg in the layers of that drawing, right? So lots of different ways to see this and apply, but I think you get my idea here. One of the layers that I was dealing with in the hospital, a really big layer, was, well, I've always been gay. I just didn't have the words for it. It took me a long time to process that layer. It was a deep layer for me. And while I can say now I'm proudly and openly that I'm gay, for about 18 to 20 years, I hid that layer deep, right? It was one that I just didn't have the words for. But I think I came pretty full circle, and I've always had a very supportive family and feel very blessed and privileged to have had that support in my life. Because what I didn't realize until recently was, let's see what folks think about this and how we can learn together. Having at least blank accepting adults can reduce the risk of suicide, of a suicide attempt among LGBTQ young people by 40%. Having at least blank accepting adults can reduce the risk of a suicide attempt among LGBTQ young people by 40%. What do you think that number is? A, B, C, or D? Let's give it a few seconds and let folks, if you feel comfortable, drop it in the chat. No wrong, I mean, there is a right answer, but no judgment. You're in a safe space. So I was surprised to learn that it was just one. Having at least just one accepting adult can reduce the risk of a suicide by 40%, right? Having that trusted, safe ally. For me, it was my mom growing up, right? Letting me have my hair really short, letting me be a tomboy, right? Letting me take karate classes and kick all the boys' butts, right? I hope we have a lot more. I hope the answer is B or D or A, ideally B, right? The more, the merrier, but sometimes quality over quantity, right? And having at least one can really make a big difference. And how those think big, act smalls happen within that relationship. I want to go back briefly to this me in a tree crisis in 2010, right? That you know this story now. And I also want to share this photo of 10 years later, 2020. I look like I have my act together, right? Okay, it's my first nice professional shot. All right. Well, behind the scenes of this seemingly nice photo, I'm actually having another crisis, right? Behind this sort of smirk, I'm actually really, really, really having a hard day. And when you're having a hard day and you just really have to like kind of fake it and show up and sort of pull your bootstraps up or whatever that saying is? Well, I had to do that day. And I felt really kind of guilty about that. Here I am, a mental health advocate and all these things, and I'm sort of having to hide behind. But it was one of those days that I didn't feel comfortable, right? I didn't feel comfortable sharing yet, and I wasn't ready to process. But the point being is that I looked like I had my act together But behind the mask of this nice presentation was absolute misery, right? I was a little more regulated and grounded, had some more crayons in my crayon box. Sure, I was kind of like getting through it, but I was still in crisis, right? And it really goes to show that there's what we show and do, right? What's above the iceberg, that tip of the iceberg, that 10%, that top layer, the beautiful layer. And then there's what we feel, right? What we believe, the hallway talk, the behind the scenes, the real authentic self. Who, how, when, where, why do we show these underbellies of ourselves, right? I want to share some quotes from other people who have shared with me their layers, right? Things that they realized and discovered in their process of thinking deeper about their own layers and what those may have been for them. And feel free to drop in the chat if any of these relate with you, or if maybe you have one of these. I used to think, now I know. Or just something to consider as you maybe leave this conference. I used to think, and now I know. What's a takeaway or a learning or something that you're working on, right? I used to think I had to self-sacrifice as a leader. Now I know my team appreciates it when I model work-life balance. The next person. I used to think time off was something I did only if I had time. Who can relate with that one? I sure can. Now I know that I must prioritize filling my own cup as much as work. I used to think psychosis was just a medical symptom. Now I know it intersects with one's culture and identity. I want to go back to this psychiatric hospital experience and really share with you the ending of this story, but really the beginning of the next chapter. This photo was taken the day I was discharged by my older sister. She took this photo of my mom and I about an hour after I was picked up from the hospital, and we're walking through the beautiful rose garden of Sacramento, California. And we were trying to process as a family how to integrate this experience, right? In this photo, my mom was about 20 pounds underweight, right? She was like the social worker of this whole experience for me. She took on so much. She was very much like the wraparound of the wraparound services, right? I mean, she was like my angel in all of this. And that was a privilege to have her so involved, right? And not everyone has that privilege, right? Or has the services that can help bridge that gap. How do we have more wraparound services like this so we take that burden off of families because they're struggling too, right? At least for us, right? My family was, figuratively speaking, in the hospital with me, struggling, trying to help Amanda find herself. Because I believe mental health isn't a singular issue. It's a family issue, a cultural issue, a systems issue, a burnout issue, right? How do we hold each other during these hard times? And how do we find where those boundaries are, where we can sort of outsource that help and have a team-based approach? So after this photo was taken, it was a year of recovery, right? Not being in college, trying to learn how to walk, talk, all the different things, really kind of starting from square one, trying to manage medications, the side effects of those medications, right? How do I get back to school? What am I going to say when I get back to school? It was a lot of navigating and re-navigating life, which was a very, very humbling experience. So what do I do next, right? I had a stack of crayon drawings and apparently an internship at a psychiatric hospital on my resume. So it was a transitional time for sure. So, like I said, I had a stack of crayon drawings. So what do you do when you have a stack of crayon drawings? Well, I decided to go out in the world and share these crayon drawings because that's all I had. But I was proud of them. I was starting to get to that point where I was like, you know what? What's the worst that could happen? Like going from rock bottom, the only place it can go is up, right? So let me just try to lean into this and see where it goes. And I began to get involved in various suicide prevention fundraisers and started auctioning my crayon drawings, meeting other advocates, and wow, you can relate to this too. Here's what I went through. How did you deal with it? All these conversations happening and starting to get involved in volunteering and serving on local boards. And one thing led to the other, but it really started with putting out this picture on the left is my very first crayon drawing that I auctioned. And it was a really meaningful experience. It gave me confidence, it gave me a voice, and it gave me a community, most importantly, right? And this led to ideas, right? Like my idea for the Giving Gallery platform, where, hey, let's bring other artists together and how can we raise money for nonprofits together and be here as a team, right? Because we all have a story, right? And as I looked inward to understand my own story, then now I was able to look through the lens of other people's story and pick up my video camera and go, yeah, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to build back what I want to do and how I can help people. And for me, that translated into filmmaking, multimedia, right? Telling other people's stories. So eventually, after that year of recovery, I re enrolled in college to study human development and documentary film. And then I enrolled in this study abroad filmmaking that very summer at Trinity University in Dublin, Ireland. And I decided to make my core topic about global mental health. So I thought, all right, let's fly to the oldest psychiatric hospital in the world, Bedlam, that was built in the 13th century. And I remember walking through the gates of melancholy and madness. It was like a lion and a bear, I think. And it was like, wow, that is so relatable. Even hundreds of years later, people stayed here who weren't well, right? They used to call them inmates, right? Now we refer to them as patients or participants or members or clients or whatever it might be in your particular culture. But I'll never forget walking through those gates, and I became instantly fascinated with the cultural nuances of care, the different languages that different people use across just all sorts of different divides, right? And how do those systems handle mental health care, different policies, procedures? I interviewed the archivist there who was in charge of basically maintaining the artwork from the people who stayed at this hospital, the inmates at the time, right? I got to see their artwork firsthand and read their stories, and it was fascinating, right? That's kind of what I was doing, but in modern times, right? It was extremely humbling, and it made me wonder about how people might look back at us in hundreds of years from now, right? We'll probably have more like techno fossils and things, but it'll be a little different, I'm sure. I have no idea how that'll look, but point being, I'm curious how we set our own bar and our own standard, right? And what people will look back on and study about our time, just like I was here at Bedlam in the 13th century. After that experience, I became pretty into filmmaking, right? And over 10 years later, I've now had the privilege of interviewing hundreds of people around the world, caregivers, doctors, people with lived experience, students, executives, you name it. I've interviewed so many different people, and they all have different answers, right? When I ask them fairly simple questions: what does mental health mean to you? How does your culture talk about this topic? What's in your crayon box? Of course, I have to ask that question, and I always get such interesting responses, right? Because our stories feed our why, our purpose, right? Like, why are you in this virtual room today, right? What brings you here? Why are you passionate about your work? Or perhaps you have a talent in connecting with people. Maybe it's motivational interviewing. Maybe it's direct care and helping people process their experiences, right? What is it, the hat that you're bringing today, and why are you passionate about it? Or maybe you're not passionate about it, but maybe you're just doing it for a paycheck. Who knows? But the point is that you have a why, right? I believe that we all have some kind of why. So I invite you and encourage you to reflect on that why today and what those deeper layers might be. In case you're curious, this photo was taken in the subway system of New York City, making my very first film about first episode psychosis with Columbia Psychiatry. The goal of this short series with youth was to raise awareness about youth psychosis in New York City to help really reduce the duration of untreated illness, essentially, was the bottom line, to get people into care sooner. And our strategy with that was a campaign to tell stories, right? Authentic stories about people's lived experience. We'll be watching Amber's film in a little bit, a short trailer of it. But in starting this filmmaking journey, I got really curious about research around filmmaking and sort of creative storytelling theories and concepts, right? For example, entertainment education. You can find a lot of articles, literature, research, resources around this. And I found it really helpful, right? And also the role of transportation theory and what does that mean? So I kind of got a little academic and heady with really diving into the art and the science of storytelling. For example, what is entertainment education? Well, it's delivering pro-social and health messages with the goal of positively influencing awareness, knowledge, attitudes, or behaviors. I found transportation theory also very interesting, where the viewer loses themselves in some idea of reality as they're accepting the narrative of whatever they're watching, right? You know how like when you're watching Netflix and you're just so like dialed in, you're watching it and then whoa, an hour and a half went by and you were transported into this experience of feeling entertained and maybe even moved by this experience, right? Transportation. How do we transport people? And not just with mediums and films and products, right? But in life, right? In services, in systems, in culture. I think these two terms can be translated in lots of different ways and gets us thinking outside the box. Also became very interested in digital media advertising, particularly in early psychosis intervention. Like, what do we do with the story once it's created, right? How do we get the story into the hands of people who might really benefit from seeing it? Back to Amber, this is us, a little behind the scenes of us creating her film. And really, again, this was my first time making a film, so I was pretty nervous, to be honest. And it was really fascinating and a wonderful experience working with Amber and really having kind of this peer-to-peer production with her, really trying to capture her story. And so I would be, so I'd like to show you her story now, and it's about a 1-minute trailer of Amber. And it might be a little choppy on your end, so just bear with it, please. It really depends on each of our own respective internet bandwidth. So just try to listen if you're having a hard time seeing, but I hope it plays back smoothly.
Amanda,
Oh, yes.
just as you start that, the audio was a little low before. I don't know if you can turn it
Oh,
up on your end, if that will help.
yeah, let me turn up the audio. Okay, let's try
Thanks
this
so much.
again.
Sorry to interject.
Okay, hopefully that's better. Feel free to jump in if.
At 19, I was diagnosed with schizophrenia. So just imagine having commentary on your every move, every thought, every action that you could possibly think of, and just have that commentary turn negative. I think that's the best way to explain the voices in my head. Letting that come out of my head and be out in the open, that was the way that I knew that I was going to get better.
Thank you, Amber, and thank you for watching. You can watch the full films as well online. They're totally free and available to watch. So if you feel like watching the longer version, they're definitely available for you. I can drop the link in the chat after this. Drew, I'd like to share with you Drew's story, who is also one of the series in this youth psychosis series in New York City.
Mental illness isn't really something that we really talk about in the African community. My name is Drew. I'm 26. I'm a New Yorker. I'm a first-generation West African, and I'm a graduate of the On Track New York program. I think there are like preconceived notions about mental health. I don't know, what do you think when somebody has like schizophrenia?
Never knew what I could do when I would let it loose. Never call the truth and the both and to tell the truth.
What do you think our relationship has been like?
You're the second mother.
I feel like sometimes you try things out that you're like, okay, well, she's younger, she might be hip to it.
Right. Mental health issues are not something that are within my scope of understanding or even thinking, because I come from a country where if you have mental health problems, it's a choice.
How did I feel when he was diagnosed with schizophrenia? I felt heavy. I felt, whoa, it's stunning. It's what life is he gonna have? Well, like, what does it mean for him? What can we do right now to help him? Because he's clearly in pain. He's clearly confused. Like, we need immediate, like, trauma, like immediate help. Then thinking about ourselves. Like, what does this mean for us? What are we gonna share? Who are we gonna share with? Because it's a huge stigma. How do I show him that I still love him? I'm still proud of him.
Something that my uncle told me that was really powerful was that things aren't going to be easier. They're going to be tough, but you're going to get better.
Thank you, Drew, for sharing your story. Thank you for watching. I really love that film because it brings in the whole family's perspective, the sister, the mom, and in the longer film, you see different providers and clinicians that he worked with to also help Drew through this experience of understanding of his experiences, right? As well as the different societal factors he was facing in the move to New York City, things like that, other stressors that may have contributed, right? This is a behind the scenes photo of Sebastian. I'm not going to share Sebastian's story today for time purposes, but it's kind of a cool behind the scenes shot. And the reason I share it is because we're not just creating a film. It's not just like a product, check the box, right? Really, the goal is to have an experience, right? To have a memorable, fulfilling, empowering experience, right? I want these people to walk away and feel like, yeah, like I shared my story in a safe way and in an effective way, in a way that maybe can help someone else, right? And really the power in how we share our stories and that being its own kind of therapeutic experience unto itself, right? How do we create experiences with the products we're working with or the people who we're supporting, right? It's not just one meeting, it's not just one deliverable, right? How do we create that into a journey, an enjoyable journey, right? Peer-to-peer and trauma-informed filmmaking is a value that I really try to live by every day, but especially in the context of filmmaking, right? I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with trauma-informed care and peer-to-peer like values and competencies, right? And really peer-to-peer is that shared lived experience, right? Being able to relate over shared experiences that we may have gone through, right? Being able to have that empathy or sympathy in whatever layers those might bring out. So applying those, for me, it's in filmmaking, right? Then how do you apply peer-to-peer practices or trauma-informed filmmaking in your context, right? In whatever way that might be appropriate. Some of the values that I try to instill in thinking about trauma-informed care and peer-to-peer in a filmmaking context is really unto itself trauma-informed care, right? Bottom line goal is we don't want to re-traumatize an individual, right? I certainly don't want someone to be activated on site when I'm working with them and interviewing them, right? There's a lot of pre-work that goes into this on-site production work, of course, but bottom line is wanting this to be a memorable and empowering experience for them sharing their story, right? In a very safe way. And then it's of course person-centered, right? What are your preferred pronouns? Or for example, one of the first questions that I ask people when I'm interviewing them is, hey, like what is your language? Like how do you want to talk about your experiences? I've interviewed a lot of people who identify with schizophrenia and psychosis, and one of the first questions I ask them is, hey, like how do you want to talk about this? What is your framework? What is your lexicon for this experience? So I know, and so I have an understanding and can respect that throughout this process and appreciate what you're going through. And some say I'm a voice hearer, and some say I live with schizophrenia, some say all sorts of different things, right? I've heard many different interpretations of their experience, right? So really digging deeper into that cultural competency around people's experiences and not assuming it might be something, right? What's on and off the table with your story? What things are we not talking about that you're not comfortable with? And what things do you want to focus on, right? And of course, peer driven, right? I remind them that they're in a safe, judgment-free space, and I get it, right? This is a collaborative project. And of course, can't have peer driven without consent and having a crisis protocol in place, a safety plan, right? If this is a collaborative experience, they're going to review this product, they're going to review the film, they're going to be happy with how it turns out, right? They are really the directors, right? And I'm bringing the tools to help capture it. And part of that is strategic sharing, right? And really strategic sharing, that term was coined out of the foster care movement and trying to help foster care folks share their story in ways that were more safe and effective, right? To avoid re-traumatization, tokenization, exploitation. And if you Google strategic sharing, you can find a lot of wonderful resources, especially as it relates to the media and sharing your story with the media. But the idea here being that we all have different ways that we're thinking about strategic sharing, right? How we share and open up to ourselves, our family, our friends, maybe our therapist, or perhaps the public at large, right? What are those boundaries that we have with where we feel comfortable sharing, whether that's anonymous or publicly? A quick note that a fun serendipitous outcome of the films that I showed you today was that it ended up becoming a research study, and we were able to demonstrate that these videos as a form of intervention ended up reducing stigma, right? Because that was the goal. So really connecting the art and science of stories and how they really do have so much power to get people into care sooner when they don't have as much societal or self-stigma. And then what do you do with those stories, right? Well, that's where digital advertising comes into play and thinking about how we can apply commercial advertising methodologies for mental health purposes, right? You see a video ad, a story that you relate with, you click on the Learn More button, and maybe you make a call, right? As simple as that, right? So we did that. We broadened this campaign. The last example I want to share today is another medium, another format, how to illustrate complex topics and stories. I'm really excited to share with you this project that's been a 1.5-year project to create within the Inspire training program. If we have any Inspire folks in the room, please drop in the chat, say who you are. There's so much to be proud of. This is a very collaborative project working with clinicians, trainers, and a whole stakeholder council of people with lived experience. And it was really a joy to make it. And you all will be seeing the debut today for the first time ever, first group to see the trailer film of this product. And you can see the longer 7-minute project, the longer 7-minute film online as well. So here's the 1-minute trailer.
Amanda, sorry to interject again.
Oh,
Can you
yes.
turn your audio all the way up for us?
Oh, you got it. All the way up. Okay, let's see how that goes. Oh, and sorry, it's actually the next slide. Apologies. But yes, I'll turn my audio all the way up, and thank you. So just to kick off before the video, the core question that we were asking ourselves in creating this illustrative animated film was, how do we creatively yet accurately depict symptoms and experiences, right? There were so many storyboards, mock-ups, listening sessions of how can we really speak 1,000 words in a picture, in a frame, right? Different icons or speech bubbles or sensory experience, what we hear, what we see, what's moving to communicate this experience of psychosis, right? And again, that was informed heavily by people with lived experience. So here's the 1-minute trailer. Oh, sorry, where is it? Should be right. Oh, it's not playing back. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what's going on. Might be a lag. Okay, well, we'll just move forward. I know we're coming on time here, so I'll drop the link in the chat once. I apologize. A lot of lead up to that, and we can't watch the 1-minute trailer. But here's a little sneak peek of one of the clips, right? And I love this scene because we're trying to communicate compassion and empathy in this frame here, where the participant, Alex, is communicating to the therapist, May, in this case, what he's experiencing. And then as they share and build trust and co-create meaning, the room brightens up and the colors come to life, right? So we are thinking about concepts like that creatively. And then how do we represent team culture and coordinated specialty care, right? What do teams look like, and how are they wrapping around this individual and their family to provide that care? And how do we demonstrate that visually, right? To really honor all the different experiences and hats that people are wearing to really support families and participants. And really, I think that's true for all of us in this room today, right? Being here in this conference as a community and as a team, learning more about mental health and wellness, and then how we can bring that back to ourselves and the people we're serving and the people we love, right? In closing, I want to bring you a couple reminders that we talked about today and things that we talked about. What's in your crayon box, right? What are those things that you do that feed your soul? Or what are other people's crayon boxes, right? And asking them, hey, what's in your crayon box? This is something I learned, and I would love to know what's in your crayon. And what layers are you dealing with, right? What's beneath the surface? How can we dig deeper with people and really ask them how they're doing and bring those hallway conversations into the boardroom, so to speak, right? What are those beneath the surface things that are keeping us from getting to the next level with our programs, with the people we care about, with the people we're serving, with our own wellness as well, right? What layers are getting to that beautiful picture that you see for yourself? What's your iceberg, right? What are you showing and how are you feeling, right? How are we showing up and how are we feeling? And what's your think big, act small, right? What are those little things we can do to pay it forward, again, for ourselves and for the people around us and the people we are serving? Right? Think outside the box of mental health. Thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate all your time. I think we might have a few minutes for questions. So I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I'll drop in the chat the links to the animated videos as well, since I know I didn't get a chance to show that. So thanks for bearing with me on that one.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And I was able to drop in the links
Oh,
to
perfect.
the couple stories, the On Track New York stories. But if you want to share the animated video, that would
Yes.
be great. We do have a moment or two for a couple of questions or comments. If anybody wants to post a question or comment either in the chat or via the Q&A, I am happy to present it to Amanda. So take a moment, think for a moment. Lots of thank yous and excellence. But if you have a comment, excuse me, please feel free to drop it in the chat.
Oh, and I just dropped the YouTube link to the videos. You can watch the trailer and the longer film about the animation.
Thank you so much. And I see a comment, someone's seen the On Track videos, some of the best videos they've seen of peers. So nice commendations for you, Amanda. I'll ask you one question that occurs to me, maybe a tough one, but looking back on your work so far and where you see things going forward, what do you think are some of the critical next steps that we as a field could take to improve stigma, improve services? What do you think are things that maybe we could be doing to support the kind of work that you're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one of the first things I think about is nothing about us without us, right? And that could mean lots of things, and whatever role that might mean in terms of maybe people with lived experience at the table when creating products, right? Whatever that experience, that lived experience might look like, and having those people at the table and having that collaboration, because you never know what perspective you might hear. And I'm always so surprised, pleasantly surprised and humbled by the more diversity we have on these groups creating products, or for example, the first episode psychosis work group that we served on together, and right, so many different hats, roles, perspectives coming together. And I learned so much in that process. So I think that's a big one, is in terms of how we work together and being very open to perspectives. It's really easy to, I think, get into a lane of what we think and how we think things should happen, but being willing and able to push the envelope and think of what's outside the box, really, right, of traditional norms or paradigms or treatment models, and what might be, what we might be missing, really.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Amanda. I did drop your your website in the chat as well, if people want to check out the other work that you're doing. And it looks like, so maybe if you want to drop the video link one more time, Amanda. It looks like some people.
Yes, you got it. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I couldn't see the chat when I was speaking, so I apologize. It sounds like the audio didn't come through on the video fully.
You know what, Amanda, the link is, just change it to everyone. You sent it to the hosts and panelists.
Oh, okay, got it. So the link, let me go ahead and do that really quickly.
And we'll also share these with the participants via email as well. So if you don't see them or you don't get a chance to click on them here now, we'll share them with you after the session.
Okay, got it. Copying the link right now. Okay, everyone, here is the link to the animated film about CBTP made with Stanford. And then the ones about youth psychosis, and if there's a lot of others on my site, again, they're all free to watch, so please have fun with it. I will just take you to that page in particular, though, about the youth psychosis program. The films that I showed today are on this link right here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for being here today.
Wonderful. We really appreciate your words and your presentation. We will follow up with an email to all participants with these links so everyone can check out the amazing work you've done, Amanda. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you. Okay, take care.
You too. For all of our attendees, we have a break, a few-minute break before our next session starts at 10:25. So a few minutes to take a moment, and then we'll see you at our next session, Leveraging Your Strengths, a Foundation of Success, Recovery, and Happiness with Dr. Tony Zippel. So take a moment and we will see you in the next session. Thank you so much.